Beneath the blanket of snow, fear lurked in the shadows of two separate worlds, one of instinct and one of sorrow. Would they dare to step into the light together or remain prisoners of their solitude? In the stark, stunning landscape of Madison Mountain, the world stood quiet, save for the whispering winds that sent jagged branches dancing against a tumultuous sky. It was a realm where the sun seldom broke through the thick clouds, leaving the ground cloaked in a heavy blanket of snow. The air was sharp, biting at exposed skin and seeping through even the warmest of garments. Towering pine trees, heavy laden with white, swayed gently, forming a ghostly silhouette against the gray expanse. This was a place of serene beauty, but also of profound isolation. At the mountain's edge, nestled within a flickering glow, sat an old vehicle, its windows fogged and doors slightly ajar. Inside, the warmth emanated like a beacon of hope amidst the bleakness surrounding it. Roy, a retired wildlife photographer, reclined in the driver's seat, feeling both physically and emotionally adrift. The life he once knew had shifted dramatically after the passing of his wife, leaving him trapped in a web of solitude and grief. This drive to the mountains was his way of seeking solace, his camera resting on the passenger seat, a constant reminder of moments he had captured with her by his side. Outside, as the icy gusts howled around the car, Amani, a solitary ape accustomed to the warmth of the jungle, was caught in a torrent of instinctual fear. His once lush home, vibrant with life, had transformed under the relentless grip of winter. Amani's thick fur, usually so protective, felt inadequate against the chilling temperatures that seeped into his bones. He was a creature of curiosity and caution, his large eyes wide with uncertainty as he navigated this desolate landscape. Thoughts of safe havens and comforting shelters flashed through his mind, yet they remained far from reach, enveloped by the oppressive cold. It wasn't just hunger guiding Amani, it was a deeper sense of survival that drove him forward, despite the warnings of his instincts that whispered to keep his distance from the unknown, the car, the human. A low rumble echoed in his stomach, mingling with the howling wind, sparking an instinctual battle within him. Could he trust? Should he venture closer? As he stood, half hidden beneath the skeletal branches of a nearby tree, the warm glow from the vehicle flickered like stars in a dark sky, calling to him with an undeniable allure. Peering cautiously around the tree trunk, Amani caught sight of Roy, his reflection shimmering softly on the window pane as he stared into his own thoughts, oblivious to the figure outside watching him. For a moment time stood still. Amani's heart raced, mixing dread with curiosity. He longed for warmth and safety, but was trapped by a primal instinct to flee at the first sign of trouble. Roy, too, was grappling with his own demons. Alone in the vehicle, surrounding himself with lenses and memories, he felt the ache of loss more deeply every day. Today, as the snow began to fall heavily outside, a familiar sense of emptiness enveloped him. He noticed the thickening flakes swirling like ghosts in the air, a reminder of life's unpredictable nature. Another day, another lonely moment, he murmured to himself, swiping away a tear that trembled on the edge of his eyelid. Just as the storm began to rage, flinging snow in wild spirals, Amani felt the weight of desperation. The cold was closing in around him, wrapping its icy fingers around his resolve to remain hidden. With hesitant steps, he began to approach the source of the light, a flicker of hope sparking in his heart. A hope that perhaps this strange glowing object could provide the sanctuary he'd been yearning for. But with each step closer, instincts warred against desires, and for the first time in his life, he stood at the precipice of trust, perhaps not only in a human, but also in himself. The atmosphere thickened as each character aligned with their fears, neither aware that this would be the moment their paths intersected. In his solitude, Amani was about to discover the warmth of companionship he so desperately sought, while Roy would face the fact that perhaps, just perhaps, within the cold embrace of winter, he could find a reason to smile again. Their stories, unknown to each other, but soon to intertwine, awaited the veritable storm that loomed, shaking the foundation of all they thought they understood. The winds of Madison Mountain howled like a pack of wolves, enveloping the landscape in an icy grip. The cold was so pervasive that it seemed to seep into the very marrow of the earth, transforming the verdant jungle into an inhospitable wasteland. Amani, the solitary ape, shivered as he ventured from the familiar underbrush, stepping cautiously onto the gnarled roots that jutted forth like frozen fingers, grasping at the white carpet of snow. The snowflakes danced around him, swirling in a chaotic ballet, as if nature herself was trying to sweep him away from his sanctuary. Most creatures had retreated to the solace of underground burrows or to the nests they had so carefully built. Yet here was Amani, sleeves of muscled fur drenched in the chill that hung heavy in the air, his sinewy frame tense with apprehension. His heart thrummed with the pulse of primal instinct, urging him to seek refuge from the bitter cold that nipped at his skin. He knew that the jungle was no longer safe, not in this unforgiving season where food was scarce and desperation fueled the wild. As he roamed through the skeletal trees, their branches reaching like barren arms into the cloud-laden sky, an unexpected warmth caught the edge of Amani's senses. It gleamed softly against the monochrome backdrop of his world, a beacon in the vast, white desolation. Cautiously, he approached the source of light, moving as quietly as his dampened feet would allow. What lay before him was a vehicle, parked with the rear door slightly ajar. A soft glow spilled from the inside, giving off an inviting heat that piqued his curiosity, even as it stirred dread in the pit of his stomach. Inside sat Roy, a man whose once vibrant spirit was now dulled by loss, like the landscape outside his window. His rusted frame of a truck was filled with the scent of rich coffee brewing, a stark contrast to the barren chill that lay beyond his window. He was seated in contemplation, staring at the blustery scene that encapsulated him. Winter had taken the warmth from his heart, just as it stripped the trees of their leaves. Yet he found solace in this moment of isolation, even as shadows of sorrow stretched across his spirit. The sudden jolt of his old camera strap grabbing his attention drew Roy back to the present. He cast his gaze toward the window and froze. There was something moving just beyond the glass, a shadow cloaked in the swirling snow. He blinked, unsure if his mind was playing tricks on him. But there it was again, a fleeting glimpse of a creature drawing near, its body half hidden in the passenger side mirror's reflection. Amani halted a mere few feet from the glowing door, feeling both fear and a strange longing, the urge to survive battling with the instinct to flee. He watched as Roy's hand hovered over his camera, hesitating, the leather strap creaking under the weight of indecision. Amani's presence startled him, but also brought forth an unyielding curiosity. "Easy there, big guy," Roy murmured, his voice unsteady yet calming. "I'm not here to hurt you." The warmth of his breath fogged the glass, where a delicate cloud blurred the line between two worlds, one of wild instinct and the other of fragile humanity. Amani tilted his head, an embodiment of unlikely conflict, a creature of the wild approaching the very beings he had instinctively avoided all his life. Yet in that moment, his instinct for survival urged him to stay, to embrace what could potentially be a life-saving connection instead of his learned suspicion. The world outside was unforgiving, and the storm only seemed to intensify, howling its discontent as cold drummed against Roy's truck like a restless heart. Is it just the storm, or something more? Roy thought, wrestling with his emotions. The storm raged on outside, but the warmth from within began to feel like a lifeline, tethering them both to newfound hope amidst gripping sorrow. The camera, once a tool to capture beauty, now felt like a barrier. The two, each grappling with their own vulnerability, were on the brink of something profound. Amani's eyes reflected the flickering light from within the car, a mirror to the understanding that was just beginning to take root between them. The air crackled with an unspoken promise of change as the storm continued its relentless assault, urging each soul to pursue connection, no matter how daunting it might seem. As the howling winds tore through the dense trees of Madison Mountain, the once vibrant world transitioned into a haunting somberness. The snow fell thick and fast, enveloping the land in a shroud of white. High above, dark clouds swirled ominously, echoing the turmoil within both Amani's and Roy's hearts. The secluded atmosphere intensified the chill that had long since seeped into the bones of the solitary ape seeking refuge. Amani crouched low, peering curiously at the glowing light of Roy's vehicle. a beacon amidst the unforgiving storm. Yet instinct kept him rooted. The primal whisper of fear clawed at his insides, urging him to flee back to the familiarity of his jungle, where warmth and safety were expected. With every wintry gust that battered the world outside, he was reminded of how different the human domain felt, how dangerous it seemed. Inside the car, Roy felt a sudden jolt of adrenaline as his eyes locked onto the shadowy figure at the window. His instincts, engraved deeply from years of photographing wildlife, urged him into action. He instinctively grasped his camera, a lifetime companion, yet he hesitated. This moment felt charged, palpable, the presence of another sentient being at his side, so close yet so distant. There was an urgency in the air, as if both of their lives hinged upon the decisions made in the next breath. "You! What do you want?" he whispered, half to himself more than to the creature against the frigid glass. The storm had created a fortress around the vehicle, removing him from the roar of the world, intensifying a feeling of isolation that felt all too familiar since his wife's passing. The absence had carved deep grooves in his heart, and here was an opportunity, yet uncertainty lingered, coiling around his resolve. Amani shifted, eyes wide with uncertainty as he caught the human's gaze. The warmth spilling from the vehicle and the haunting shadows of his instincts collided within him. He could feel the heaviness of the man's sorrow. But could he trust him? The stories he had heard from other creatures, tales of betrayal and danger echoed in his mind, each word relaying the grim reality of human actions. As seconds passed, a silence stretched between them, punctuated only by the wind's ferocity. Roy, seeing Amani's hesitation, felt a longing swell within him, an urge to soothe the palpable tension. "Here, look," he uttered, lifting a small container from the passenger seat, sandwiches wrapped in paper, remnants of a long-forgotten picnic. "I promise I'm not going to hurt you." In that moment, Amani felt the tug of hunger, an instinct more powerful than fear. Slowly, he closed the distance, his heart pounding in sync with the throbbing storm outside. Yet his own trepidation kept him inches away from the safety of the car. "You're safe. It's just food," Roy continued, his voice gentle yet firm, desperately hoping to penetrate the wall of distrust surrounding the magnificent creature beyond the window. "I know it's strange. I lost someone too recently. You and I, we're not so different." Amani tilted his head, perplexity clouding the animal side of his instincts. The human spoke as if he understood, as if the isolation that gripped them both bridged a chasm created by their very nature. But could words be enough to banish the specter of fear? Could trust emerge from the depths of suffering? With a shaky breath, Amani took a tentative step forward, his instincts flaring to life as he balanced on the threshold of surrendering his wariness. Roy opened the car door slightly, revealing warmth and flickering light, the very antidote to the cold outside. Before Amani could fully comprehend his actions, he edged closer, the aroma of bread and fresh vegetables wafting temptingly to his nostrils. "It's safe. I won't come any closer," Roy reassured, offering the food. A symbolic gesture of connection, a bridge over the abyss of their fears. The storm raged intensely, howling as if protesting this unexpected encounter. Amani extended a hand, trembling with caution, snatching the food from Roy's grasp. Their eyes met, an innocent exchange charged with vulnerability. In that heartbeat, they were no longer just a man and a beast. They were two souls wrestling with grief and the desire for understanding. "See? That wasn't so bad," Roy murmured, a flicker of hope igniting in his chest. Yet the shadows creased his brow as he feared the storm wasn't just outside. The struggles they faced were merely beginning. Amani took a step back, chewing slowly, his gaze flickering between the half-empty sandwich and the determination on Roy's face. As the snow continued to fall, like a silent tide around them, each swallowed bite echoed the growing warmth of an unlikely bond, channeling the essence of their shared solitude. But the fear lurked still, a tempest brewing within, escalating from mere uncertainty to a critical peak. Would this fragile moment endure, or would the churning storm, their inner turbulence, tear them apart just as it threatened the world outside? The night stretched on, revealing both the turmoil and the flickering glimmers of trust, and with it a profound possibility, one that could transform them into something beyond the apathy life had bestowed. The howling storm outside transformed from a mere inconvenience to a monstrous blizzard, the wind's rage battering against the windows of Roy's car like a wild beast eager to break free. Inside the fragile vehicle, the air thickened with unspoken fears. Amani, initially drawn to the warmth and light, felt the primal instinct to retreat clawing at his insides. He huddled by the door, his heart hammering a hard tune of anxiety, each thud echoing against the silence that hung heavily between him and Roy. Amani! Roy's voice broke through the chaos. It was a quiet, uncertain whisper, yet it bore the weight of sincerity, echoing tales of shared warmth and compassion. You're safe here. Amani's wide brown eyes darted to the man who sat behind the wheel, a figure shadowed by loss yet illuminated by the flickering glow of the dash. His instincts screamed at him to flee, a remnant of a life spent in constant vigilance against human cruelty, but something innate tugged at him, a yearning for connection. In that instant, the storm became a backdrop to a lonely symphony, drawing two disparate souls toward one another in search of solace. With each passing second, Amani's breaths quickened. He hesitated, shifting from foot to foot, eyes glancing at the offerings laid out in front of him. A piece of bread tinged with the buttery aroma of kindness. The golden hue of the food seemed inviting amidst the bleakness outside. Yet trust was not easily given. It was a precious talisman, held tightly within the confines of his heart. Come on, buddy. It's all right, Roy encouraged softly, pushing the bread a fraction closer with trembling fingers. I know you're afraid. I'm afraid too. But you don't have to be. Amani's nose twitched, drawn to the scent. Hunger gnawed at his belly, a primal instinct that tugged him closer to the vehicle. For a brief moment, fear and desperation waged war within him. Slowly he edged closer, the balance between hesitance and need shifting precariously. As Amani leaned forward, the car creaked beneath another gust of wind, rattling the flimsy glass and sparking a low growl of fear from Amani. In a heartbeat, the space between them electrified. His body tensed, poised to flee as his instincts flared. But in that split second, Roy's calm, hazel eyes met Amani's fearful gaze, offering a silent promise. I won't hurt you. Words in this moment became mere vessels, but the sentiments they carried were profound. Amani felt the unspoken understanding sink deep into his bones, a recognition of shared sorrow, however unorthodox. Finally, driven by instinct over fear, he reached out cautiously and took the bread, his fingers barely brushing against Roy's. See? Not so hard, Roy smiled, his heart swelling with a sense of achievement. Yet the ache of grief lurked just beneath. I might even have some more if you want. In the dim light, Amani painstakingly tore into the bread, suspending the stormy world outside in his mind. Each bite filled not just his stomach, but a void deeper than hunger, a gaping chasm of companionship longing to be bridged. Yet uncertainty lingered just beyond the warmth of the vehicle, like a lurking predator. I've had my share of loneliness too, you know, Roy murmured, letting a sigh escape into the stillness. After Elaine passed, I thought I could handle it, just me and my photos. His voice quivered, laden with the weight of sorrow. But the quiet just amplifies it. Everything is too empty, too loud when it's quiet. The empathy in his voice resonated with Amani, who, though a creature of instinct, understood the ache of solitude. He watched Roy, who through his grief still sought to connect with something alive, an embodiment of the fragility of existence. The realization that they could find kinship in their suffering tethered them closer, a thread spun from the shared fabric of loneliness. My jungle, my home feels vacant now, Amani thought, feeling deeply the loss of his vibrant world buried beneath layers of snow. He looked out the small window, glistening with frost, reflecting the chaos of the storm and the solitude of his being. I don't know what tomorrow will bring, Roy confessed, breaking the tension. This storm, it's the harshest I've seen. He paused, hesitating. But maybe if we hold on, if you choose to stay with me, just for tonight, the offer hung in the air, and Amani sensed not only warmth, but purpose in it. The weight of trust still felt foreign. The thought of staying felt reckless, yet unspeakably tempting. Would he allow this man, this human, a chance? Could they possibly bridge the divide between their worlds, finding comfort in each other's presence amidst the turmoil? The storm howled louder, a reminder of their precarious situation as branches snapped in the wind, the world outside a tumult of chaos. With the moment stretching before them, Amani's instinct to flee clashed against the budding connection, the desire to find sanctuary growing fierce in his heart. As the violence of the storm intensified and rattled the car one last time, a sharp crack interrupted the clumsily growing bond. A flash of movement outside caught Amani's eye, something moving closer through the swirling snow. "What was that?" Roy asked, squinting into the darkness, the air thick with tension once more. Amani's heart raced, instincts igniting, and he found his body responding to danger like a coiled spring, fight or flight. Would he flee into the icy wilderness, abandoning the flicker of connection he'd begun to forge, or face whatever lurked beyond the depths of the blizzard? As he prepared to leap away, his body caught between the safety of Roy's warmth and the instinct to evade. A question bubbled meaningfully. What would he choose, and where would it lead him on this stormy night? The storm had reached its zenith, a howling tempest outside that seemed alive with rage. White snowflakes danced in the treacherous wind, swirling around Roy's battered old vehicle like demons unleashed from a frozen prison. The car shook under the force of nature, and within, an atmosphere of tension filled the air, a palpable mix of uncertainty and pressing fear. Amani's deep brown eyes darted from the frosted window to Roy, his heart pounding with confusion. His instincts screamed at him to flee, yet as he stared at the man who sat trembling in the enclosed warmth, he felt a strange urge pulling him closer. The warmth of the car radiated like sunbeams in a tropical forest, a stark contrast to the biting chill outside. It was comforting, inviting, yet so foreign to him. "Stay back!" Roy shouted suddenly, his voice slicing through the oppressive silence that had settled. The reflection of the night inside the car turned momentarily chaotic as his fingers curled tightly around his camera, his initial weapon of choice and shield against his own fear. But even as the words escaped his lips, he felt a pang of regret saturate his spirit. How could he ask for distance when he wanted connection, however tenuous it may be? Amani stepped back, uncertainty etched across his expressive face. The barrier of glass and metal between them felt insurmountable, and he wrestled with an internal conflict that mirrored the tumult outside. Instinct screamed at him to survive, to protect his heart, yet the warmth emanating from the man beckoned him with vivid promises of safety and understanding. "Just let me be," Roy murmured, almost to himself, his eyes softening as he faced the ape. The weather was an uncanny reflection of his own despair, raging and wild, yet holding a strange beauty, the way life often did. "I don't mean any harm. Just please don't hurt me." Amani tilted his head, keenly aware of the vulnerability in Roy's voice, the tremor, the fatigue of old grief. With each heartbeat, he realized that this man felt as powerless against his inner storm as Amani did against the relentless nature around them. It was a revelation that pierced through the layers of fear and mistrust that had shaped his life in solitude. Then, as if sensing an awakening, the wind howled even louder, rattling the car in a wildly unpredictable manner. A fleeting moment of terror flashed through Amani, and he edged away from the comforting glow. His instincts whispered for him to escape while he could. But as he turned to flee, he caught Roy's gaze, deep and earnest, inviting him back. "No, please, don't go," Roy implored, his voice now barely above a whisper, packed with raw emotion. "You're not alone in this, I promise." He lowered the camera as if to offer Amani an olive branch instead of a weapon. "I won't hurt you. I don't want to be alone anymore either." The words cracked through the icy veneer surrounding Amani's heart, allowing a cascade of warmth to flow through him. He paused, his mind racing with the realization that both were just souls seeking redemption and security, trapped in their own storms. For a heartbeat that felt like eternity, they simply stared at each other, the unspoken bond of shared sadness and struggle flowing in the silence. "Your trust is something I can't take for granted," Roy continued, his eyes glimmering with desperate hope. You're more than just an animal to me. You're part of this world in ways I've forgotten. Forcing himself to step back, Amani felt the drive to engage. You don't understand. Humans cause pain, he replied, his voice barely above a whisper, wavering between fear and hope. Pain can't define us, Roy countered, a determination igniting in him. I lost someone I loved, and it nearly destroyed me. But in this storm, I find the strength to connect again, even with you. Please let me show you. In that moment, the storm broke outside. A crack of lightning illuminated the car for the briefest instant, spilling silver light over their stairs. Imani's heart raced as he sensed the shift, the turning point materializing in the swirling chaos outside. Roy reached inside a small bag beside him, emerging with a simple sandwich made for a long night. Here, it's food. It's safe. Just try, Roy urged, extending it slowly, not as a command but as an offering of goodwill. Amani hesitated, caught between centuries of instinct and the vulnerability radiating from the man. Tentatively, he approached, driven by an impulse deeper than logic. The wind howled and rattled, but in this moment, it felt like a distant memory rather than a menacing presence. As he grasped the sandwich with cautious fingers, a small spark of trust flickered, illuminating the shadows that once consumed their connection. The breaking point had arrived. It was no longer just about survival. It was about a shared bond, about unraveling the tight clasp of fear that had held them hostage for far too long. Roy let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding, a sign that both their lives were shifting, both were evolving. The storm outside was simmering down, but the real tempest, the one raging in their hearts, slowly began to settle too, transformed by a simple act of kindness in a world cloaked in doubt. The tides were turning, the dawn of a new beginning welcoming them beyond the veil of winter, ready to embrace a brighter horizon forged from understanding and connection. As dawn's gentle light began to filter through the remnants of the relentless storm, Amani stood at the tree line, surveying the world that stretched beyond the safety of the vehicle he had just left. The snow, now a patchwork of glistening mounds and soft drifts, caught the sun's rays, creating a crystalline landscape that twinkled like scattered diamonds. The fierce winds had quieted to a whisper, leaving an uncanny peace in the air, a stark contrast to the chaos that had unfolded during the night. In that serene moment, Amani reflected on his transformative journey. He could feel the warmth of trust blooming within him, a warmth that had started with Roy's small acts of kindness. As his eyes traced the sharp lines of the mountains he once feared, he realized they held no threat now, but rather embodied a sense of belonging. He turned back towards the car one last time, silently thanking Roy, the man who, like him, had battled the storms of life alone, but had emerged with a spirit renewed. Inside the car, Roy watched Amani with a heart filled with bittersweet emotions. The companionship they had forged in their shared struggle transcended species. It was a bond formed in vulnerability, a recognition of their mutual loneliness that urged them both to confront what had long been buried within their souls. Roy felt a swell of purpose rise in him after so long adrift in grief. He knew he had been the older figure in this unusual friendship, but somehow Amani had guided him towards healing. Goodbye, my friend, Roy whispered, voice trembling slightly as he leaned against the window, his breath fogging the glass. The thought of returning to solitude was daunting, yet he no longer felt afraid. The storm had ended, and with it, the chains that had bound him in sorrow began to loosen. Meanwhile, Amani paused, turning his head back to Roy. In that moment, their eyes met, deep pools of understanding that transcended words. Amani chirped softly, a sound of affirmation, a salute to the bond that had emerged from their shared struggle, and Roy's heart clamored in response, a buoyant beat filled with hope. As Amani slipped back into the safety of the jungle, he carried with him the lesson of empathy that Roy bestowed upon him. Each interaction had bridged not just the gap of fear, but had infused them both with a profound appreciation for life and each other. For Roy, the emptiness left by loss was now softened by the warmth of kindness, and he made a silent vow to embrace life's beauty once more, perhaps to return to his photography and celebrate nature as Amani had taught him. Together they had ventured through the dark. Amani, understanding the potential for kindness in human hearts, and Roy, discovering that moving forward did not mean forgetting, but embracing a vibrant world that awaited him. In their silent farewell, they found not just solace, but the renewed strength to face their worlds anew. A rebirth crafted through the beautiful dance of empathy and connection.